And then there was a point where she just had like grabbed a hold of my arm for me to stop trying. And I just held on to her for, I don't know how long, until the life went out of her arm. I grew up on a sheep farm in Rocky Ford, Colorado. Very poor. Parents they struggled a lot. And by the time I was, 5 years old, they ended up getting a divorce. My dad found out that my mom had an affair. My mom got really scared. She took me and my brother and left. Ran to Washington. Like 9 months later in Spokane, my dad tracked us down and found us and then took us back. That was like my life up until the point where I was, like 5, 6 years old. When I went back to the farm and was living with my dad, life wasn't easy. We were on the verge of losing everything. I know we had a couple winters we didn't have propane, barely had electricity, we didn't have heat. We ended up having to burn furniture to stay warm. To just watch the struggle, it changed something inside of me, and it made me angry. And I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't have a lot of anything, just because I was carrying a lot of weight. And up until the time I was, like 10 or 11 years old, then my dad worked a lot more nights. We were left alone taking care of sheep. After several years, I think from the time I was like maybe 5, 6 years old, I didn't see my mom. I might have seen her maybe once or twice from the time I was 12 years old. I think it was when she finally kind of started to work her way back into my life. And then once I finally had that opportunity, I took advantage of it. We went to Eugene, Oregon, and then that was a complete culture shock for me, from coming from this sheep farm to Eugene, Oregon, which is full of culture and drugs, and like it started with weed, because that was, there was a lot of it around there. Once I tried it, it was off and running. Then when I came back to Colorado to live with my dad back on the farm, I was just like, man, I don't want to be here anymore. I want that. So then the next year I went back, and I ended up going to school. I went to the 10th grade there. I only went for a little while. I didn't make it very long, because I was deep into the drugs and into that scene. So I just quit school, and I started getting in a lot of trouble. I started running around with a lot of rough people, a lot of older people that were several years older than me, and they were just it was all criminal activity, drugs and crime, and I didn't like who I was. I never felt good enough, so I always had to do things to feel important or to be heard. When I got out of prison, I was around 24 years old. I got out of prison, and I met her. It was kind of a weird situation. I had an ankle band on, and I was on ISP through the halfway house, and the day I got that off, one of the guys that was in there's wife told me, hey, my wife's coming to bring some clothes, and can you bring them to me the next day? Well, she just happened to be with her friend Dion, and I don't know, we kind of hit it off. A couple years down the road, I had my 2 boys, and I started a business, and the business did really well until this guy that I was working for had filed a bankruptcy, and I ended up losing a lot of money. And I didn't have any money at that point, and I was way in debt, and so I went back to doing what I knew what I could do, and that was sell drugs. I could make money quick doing that. And I did that for several years. I cooked meth and I sold meth, and it was just part of my world, and it became everything. I didn't want to do it anymore. I was looking for something different. I missed my life as I knew it, and there was an opportunity that came. My dad offered me this job working with him on the ditch company. He was like, hey, I got this ditch rider position that pays really good, and I'd been maybe a week and a half off of the drugs, off of everything. And then one night took my family, my boys and Dion, and we went to Pueblo, hung out with her family all day long. And that night we were on our way back. It was cold, the wind was blowing, we were out in the middle of nowhere, and I had taken a road back It's a dark highway that connects to a main highway, and I started to doze off. I felt the gravel on the side of the road. I whipped the wheel back and came across the road and went into a bar ditch on the other side. So by now I'm awake, and we hit and we flipped end over end. So I didn't know, but the car came to a stop on its top, and for a couple seconds all I could hear was the tires turning and the song Platinum from Orgy, and it played like a couple verses of that, and then it quit. And then all I could hear was the wind blowing in the tires. I started feeling around. It was pitch black. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear Dominic crying. I felt around. I grabbed Dominic and I took him out and I set him on the side. I went back in and I got Donovan out, and now I could tell. First thing I did was I felt his head, and I could tell just my hand was covered in blood, and all I could do was put my hand on his head and help him out. And I set them down. I didn't know where the side of the road was or anything. I set them down in the dirt, and I went back in to try to get her out. And she was still moving, but I could tell she was trapped under there. And I remember I tried to pull her out. I tried to dig her head out. I tried to do everything I could to get her out, and I couldn't, you know. And then there was a point where she just had like grabbed a hold of my arm for me to stop trying, and I just held on to her for I don't know how long, until the life went out of her arm. So I was charged with 2 counts of vehicular assault causing bodily injury and vehicular assault causing death. And I did go to court. The DA was like, your blood test came back clean, and it was clearly an accident, you know, like I fell asleep at the wheel, and you didn't have any drugs in your system, so, you know, like I don't think I need to give you any more punishment. And so I tried to go to work with my dad. I couldn't work. You know, I worked for him for a week, 2 weeks maybe. I wouldn't allow myself to sleep. I got so back heavy into the meth. My life became just really, really crazy from that point. And I took my kids and I drugged them around. I knew that there was a time, it was coming time where I was too dangerous. I didn't care about my life. I didn't care about living, and I did all of these things to punish myself. And I got pulled over. I had drugs in the vehicle, and I went to jail for possession of methamphetamines, and I got out through this. I was staying at somebody's house where there was a lot of drugs and meth lab and all this stuff going on, and then they did a raid at the house that we were at. And then I got charged again for manufacturing because they found a meth lab. But luckily, it wasn't my house. So I ended up going to court for all of that. I got most of those charges dropped, but the one that I had got in my vehicle, the possession charge, I was looking at prison time. I ended up getting 8 years community correction sentence, which was a halfway house. I did maybe a year in there. I was out on the non-res program, but couldn't stay clean. And I eventually caved and went back to doing that. And this time I went to jail, and I didn't know what was going to happen to me, because my alternative was a 12-year suspended prison sentence. But I had heard about this place called Stout Street, which was a 2-year intensive drug treatment center. That you live there, you're part of that therapeutic community. So while I was going through this program, I started to find my way. I'd been in there a few months, and then all of a sudden, this woman shows up. Her name was Celeste. She showed up one day, and I saw her pull up in the van and get out, and I felt something with her just looking at her out the window.
Yeah, they picked me up, and I got out of the van and went into the program, and he was the first person I met besides the one that picked me up.
Celeste comes along, We become friends throughout this program. I was the OT coordinator and got to know each other for a year and a half.
You know, I just got out of jail and I'm like, okay, this guy is just, he did like an intake with me. You know, I was scared. I was kind of nervous.
But an incident happened. I was working nights. I'd been working at this meat plant. They were testing fire alarms. I came in, I went to sleep in the morning. 9 o'clock in the morning, they start testing all fire alarms in the rooms and woke me up. Can you guys like shut them off in my room? Because you know, I'm trying to sleep. And they're like, yeah, we won't do it again. Well, they did it like 3 times. And I got up, I got mad. I got out in shorts. I came out of my room, and I guess I kind of blew up and maybe said some things I shouldn't have. I didn't feel like I was threatening at the time, but I guess they took it as a threat. I went back to my room, and they told me that I needed to go to the office. And they told me, you either got to come back to the program indefinitely or leave. So I'm like, I'm leaving. I'm not really free, I'm not really out. I know I've got this thing hanging over me because I know I didn't finish the program correctly. And sure enough, within probably a month or 2, my brother calls me and says, hey, the DA's looking for you. They want to throw you back in jail. You didn't complete the program, and they're looking at throwing you in prison. I went in, I sat on the stand for, gosh, I was probably in there for 2 or 3 hours. I just remember I was sweating, and I thought I was going to go. You know, I had just got together with Celeste. We'd only been together for like, seeing each other for maybe 2 weeks. I wrote a letter to the judge, and he read it, and he came back, and his decision was, he said, I see that you've done nothing but try to do the right thing since you've been out, so I don't see that I should punish you any further. From here, you're free to go. I left the courthouse in tears because I thought I was going to prison. So me going through all of that and getting in trouble and doing that was such a blessing, and it cut my time in half. I had some stability in my life. I was clean, sober, you know, I had my kids in school, they were in sporting events, I was going to all of their things. I was living the life as you're supposed to live, you know, like things were good. Celeste was there. But she had a really hard upbringing too, and her childhood was not the greatest.
My mom was a teenager when she had me. Wasn't very emotionally there for me, so I kind of just did whatever, you know, when I was a kid. And then when I became a teenager, I was looking for love in all the wrong places. And so I did end up having a child when I was 15. I was probably about 17. He was about 2, 1.5, 2. I started to just kind of dabble in drinking, and once I felt that, it numbed the pain. A life of just one thing after another.
She already knew how I had felt about Dion. You know, obviously when you're with somebody and you love them and they die, like you don't talk about the bad things. You don't talk about the bad times. You glorify the times you had. You honor those times. And she came into a relationship thinking she was never going to be good enough, and she was always going to be second best, and she'll never have this. But I also wanted to honor my boy's mom.
So it created a lot of just kind of friction, and I honestly don't really know at what point he was doing or started like with all the drug stuff, because he hid it from me.
You know, they were always there. Anytime you work in a factory where there's hundreds of people and you have shifts that run 24 hours a day, like most of them are on drugs. So it's hard to resist, you know. When I walk in and these guys are smoking meth, and they're like, hey man, you want, and I'm tired, like, you know, take a hit, you know. So that kind of started me back thinking that I could, I'll just do it because I got to work tonight. But I already know that I can't do that. But then that company one day closed its doors. Then it was kind of, I went back to what I knew how to do. I was already in the game a little bit. So I started dealing drugs again.
But I was in denial, I think, and I didn't want to believe that that was going on. Yeah, our life took a bad turn. We were starting to drift apart. And I don't know, we're at the point where she started drinking again, because alcohol was her thing. We were both really deep
into her addiction again, and so much happened in that time. She was done. She actually had given me divorce papers. A lot of stuff had led up to this. I ended up buying this motorcycle. It was a stolen motorcycle. They were looking for it. They saw me on it and pulled me over at this guy's house. They arrested me, they found drugs, and they went to my house. They charged me with like everything, because I already have a past. I went to jail. She bonded me out as a way to try to get to me. They charged her with just a bunch of really stupid charges and stuff that she didn't know anything about. She went to jail. I ended up bonding her out, but she ended up going to jail 3 times. They would take her and take her and take her. Her lawyer told her the best thing you can do is just leave him. Leave him and don't look back. You know, he's going to prison. You ain't never gonna see him again. I knew the pain that I had caused her, and I'm like, I just wrecked this woman's life. She's innocent to this lifestyle that I've lived all of my life. I hate everything about myself. I hate everything about who I am and what I've done, and I'm gonna do what I gotta do to fix it. I don't wanna lose this relationship, even though she was done with me. I was living in my truck, and I was living in this King Soopers parking lot because I didn't have any money. I have $4 or $5. I'd put gas in my truck and I'd have $4 or $5. And I lived off of what I call mustard sliders for weeks. So it was condiments and bread. That kept me alive. Like first week or two that I got out and was on bond and had nowhere to go. And that was another turning point for me of like, do I go here or do I live in this King Soopers parking lot and eat mustard sliders?